Hey everyone, it's Jeannie here, and today I am so glad to be joined by actor, producer, and many people's beloved Superman, Dean Cain. He is acting in a new film called Trafficked, a parent's worst nightmare. And all I can say is, whoa. Dean, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me about such an incredible topic that needs to be addressed.
Well, I'll tell you what, thank you for having me, Jeannie. I appreciate it. And that introduction, I would like to take that with me everywhere. Before I walk into a room, I just have that just blasted out, and then I would step in. Thank you for watching the film and seeing it. And I just think it's a hugely important topic and subject for today that people don't really appreciate how dangerous it is, how many predators exist out there for our children. My son is 20 years old now, but I've been having these conversations with him for 20 years about the internet and people and safety and situational awareness and all these different things. I mean, even just yesterday, he got into a situation where I was like, you have to be situationally aware. You have to know where you are, where you're parked. When someone's coming up to you, do they have their hands in their pockets? Because he had an incident yesterday. I'm also an actual real life law enforcement officer. I'm a reserve police officer in Pocatello, Idaho, with a great team there. And I'm a sheriff's deputy in Frederick County, Virginia. And I work with a foundation, which is the Crimes Against Children Foundation. And it deals with this very subject. Every department has an internet crimes against children department, a unit. Most of them do, an ICAC unit, and they go after these predators, and they have a very sophisticated way of doing so. But it's incredible how sophisticated the bad guys are. And in this film, in our film, you see it happen to a beautiful young girl who is at that age where, she's susceptible to peer pressure and to things and people. And we all want someone to like us and pay us attention and that sort of situation. So to see it happen with this one girl and her story, I think it's a very effective way of warning everybody about the real dangers of human trafficking and predators for our children. That's a very clear and present danger, unfortunately, in this day and age. The internet lets everybody into your room.
Right. And the movie did a good job at showing how easy it happens. And it also, I watched it with one of my relatives, and she just kept asking me, like, is this real? Like, does this happen? And, there's a statistic at the end that says almost 1 million people in the United States. So, we think
just the United States.
Right. We think that this is somewhere in a foreign country or in a third world country where people are being bartered, like, because whatever, somebody owes somebody money. And that does happen as well. And that's very true. But in the United States, this is happening. Can you talk a little bit about why isn't this in the forefront of the media all the time? Or why do you think?
Well, I mean, if I could, oops, sorry about that. If I could, I'm just going to make sure this is my producing partner. I got to let him know I'm doing an interview so he doesn't get mad at me. Sorry.
Don't worry about it. That's okay.
I don't want to get in trouble with him either. This is a very uncomfortable truth, if you will. And sometimes we don't like to face our uncomfortable truths in this country. The media is its own animal. And what the media chooses to focus on sometimes, to me, is shocking. And I'm part of the media. I mean, I hosted the Today Show a ton. I hosted the Today Show a ton. I co-hosted Fox and Friends and all sorts of things. And so in that sense, I am part of the media, and people don't want to talk about uncomfortable, awful things. We hide so much in our media, the violence and the danger of certain things, or even the reality of opioid addiction and things like that. The reality is it's a really terrible, awful, ugly thing to see. And to talk about human trafficking, boy, you're stepping up to the next level of people really understood. And we have the odd stories where you hear about someone who's locked 3 women in his house for years and that sort of thing. And we're shocked by that. And we all get fascinated by it, but it's happening. It's gotten to the point where, like, there's even situations where, families will sell a kid into prostitution here in the United States. This stuff happens way more often than it should. And I don't know, I can't speak to why the media wouldn't cover it more or make more of an issue of it, other than the fact that it's ugly and it's uncomfortable to talk about. I wish they would. Something about it makes people think that unless they know somebody who's been a victim of it, they don't talk about it. But if you've been a victim of it, there's a stigma attached, and maybe people don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it's something that I think should be up in the forefront of our conversations, especially with all our kids on the internet, and how that opens up your entire home and their lives to predators. My two god kids are 9 years old, and I have these conversations with them all the time. Just that I had them all the time with my son growing up, and he still makes mistakes. It still
Yeah.
happens because it's tough
Well,
to be so closed off, and it's unfortunate, but you have to.
yeah, and I think that's what is so important, what you're saying, having these conversations. A unique perspective in the film was that we got to see pretty much the excruciating journey that the parents had to go through. I mean, I'm not a parent yet, but I was so emotional the entire time because of how excruciatingly painful it was to just think, oh my gosh, if that was my kid. So educate the children. Are there anything else? Are there other things that parents can do to kind of help safeguard the children?
Yes, there are, and parents and children may not like what I'm going to say, but that's too bad. Know your kids' passwords, monitor them online, monitor them when they're playing and the Xbox, monitor them all the time. So, like my son, he was allowed to play all kinds of things, but he had to be in the room with me. So the conversations he was having with people, and I'm a single dad, so he
Wow.
was in the room with me. He was stuck. There's no one else he could run to. It's like dad's rules. And I played games with him all the time. So I got involved. So I'm on the games with him and playing things with
Mm.
him. So I'm there and paying attention. I knew all of his passwords. And I said, if you have something and there's a password to something that I go to get on your phone, anytime I want to look at anything there. If you don't give me the password or it's incorrect or you hide something from me, your phone either swims or flies, because it's not going to be in
Mm.
your hand. It's either just gone like this, or I'm chucking it in the toilet or in the pool, because that doesn't, there's no negotiation. And so doing that and showing that I care and, being on top of it, even doing all of that, still things can happen. But that's my best
Right.
piece of advice is to, I mean, you can go so far as to, there are programs and things that let you look at every keystroke and things that your kids have been doing. And, it's horrible invasion of privacy for your children, but they're your children and you're trying to protect them and
Right.
you're the parent. And so for me, it's I say invade their privacy, look through their
Yeah.
bags, look through their school bag, look through their stuff, let them know that that's their property. They haven't earned the right to be a private 100% into, you're not an adult yet. You
Right.
don't have that place to go yet. You're still my child, and I'm doing this for your well-being. As much as you might think at 12 or 14 or 10 or 16, you don't. And
Mm.
and I'm only looking out for
Yeah.
your best interest. And so it's a hard thing to do, but that's what I would do as a parent. I mean, I did.
Yeah. I see that, I see that with my loved ones and, all the little ones, they're off on their like away somewhere playing a game. And, I like that you said you get involved. I think that's so important. I love that. That's really good advice.
And then it got me stuck playing World of Warcraft forever.
Forever, right?
Now, if my son's in college, we'll jump on, play Call of Duty or World of
Oh,
Warcraft together.
but
So I can,
even that speaks volumes, because parents want that, especially when the kids get older. So the fact that I feel like you established that culture in your home, he still wants it, and I love that.
I do too, because he's my favorite
Oh.
person on the planet.
So let me ask you this, because there was obviously we want people to see the film, but there was
Please.
a cool scene in the film where a church got involved, and a lot of our readers are going to be Christians, and you know, people feel like, what can we do? What can we do? Especially people of faith, we're just like, well, we're called to be the light of the world. We're called to, dispel the darkness. How do we do that with such a horrific thing?
Well, you saw a great example in the film, and it's one of the most powerful moments. Whew.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a great example. I mean, that's a perfect example. You have to talk about the ugliness of it, and you can get involved. And those people in the film, I don't want to give anything away to anybody, but that group in the film, oh, it's a great moment when this happens because it's totally unexpected, and it happened in such a strong, positive way, and it leads to a great outcome. Um, but they get involved, they pay attention, and they got involved, and that's how things happen. And it certainly goes. It certainly, you'd love to think that your faith could bring you to a place where you could be that heroic for someone, and the whole group of them being as strong as they were. It's one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, of course,
Yeah.
and it's one that gets you one of the most emotional moments too, because you realize,
Right.
wow, and so I think by being involved and being aware, and not, not hiding it, accepting that this exists and saying, we can fight back, like you said, bring darkness to the light. I mean, bring light to the darkness. It's a wonderful thing, and
Yeah.
that's a way that people of faith can do so.
Do you believe that God would want us to do that? Is that
Oh,
like on the heartbeat of, and I didn't ask you in the interview, but I know you're a part of, you were in God's Not Dead, and you are in quite a couple faith-based movies and inspirational movies. So are you a person of faith? And if so, do you believe that God does want us to be involved?
yes, I am certainly a person of faith. I'm Christian. My son, he went to a Christian high school, and he was raised Christian, and we've discussed religion ad nauseum and back and forth. And sometimes he feels more Christian, and other times he feels less Christian. I'm like, welcome to being a normal human being. So, and then I've had some incredible moments with him where things went really south for me at one point in time, and so some things that I had going on just didn't happen. And I remember how gut punched I felt. And he came up to me as a 10-year-old and was like, "Dad, it's okay. God's got something else and planned for you here." And I was just like, "What?" At that moment, it was wonderful to see him reach out and have that and start counseling me in a weird way. It's like, okay, this flipped quickly. But yeah, so I like making movies of faith and discussing faith and showing faith in a positive light. I feel like there's been a real big time attack on Christianity and morality in a sense recently, and I don't agree with it. So I do things. I'll do. There's a group that I work with, JC Films. They make these little tiny ministry films, and I say yes as often as I can because these are little stories that wouldn't be told, but they're wonderful stories. And if that little movie can affect one person, 5 people, 10 people, it's a gift. So to be able to do that, I try to as much as possible. God's Not Dead was a huge surprise. Obviously, my character, if anybody saw me in that film, was not a very redeemable guy. He's one of the only that didn't get redeemed. In fact, my son was watching that with some friends. Um, his school went and saw it. They had a screening of it, and
So
they knew
cool.
me. The kids knew me and everything, and they're watching me on screen. They're like, "Dude, your dad's a jerk. Come on, that's not him. He's playing a character." Uh,
That's
but
awesome.
the film was, a huge success, and I think part of what made that film a success, and it's something you have to be careful with. I think sometimes on faith-based films is, we weren't preaching. There wasn't a preachy film. It was there, but it was discussed in a more pragmatic way, and I think people felt like it wasn't being shoved down. If you're getting preached to all the time, I don't think that's always the best way to go, because a lot of people just shut it off. They've heard it. It's Bible speak to them. It doesn't make sense. And so I think that's why God's Not Dead really spoke to people. And Faith Under Fire is a film I just did recently with the same group. That had me when I played a pastor, and the pastor's preaching to somebody who's clearly not buying any of what he has to say because he's going through these horrible hardships. And then the pastor comes down and tries to face him and have this conversation, and the guy just decks him, which is amazing. I was like, oh, I'm interested in this film already because I want to see where this goes. And I do believe that God wants us to be involved and doing positive things. 100%. It's part of why I became a police officer, to do these things for real, to be a part of doing good and protecting people. And that's what we do here on earth. If we can do good for other people, you're serving. And
Yeah.
that's what I try to do and try to live my life. I'm far from perfect, but it's certainly the goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that you worked with organization or company that actually does fight this, because like I said, it's not any, like, it's hard to find information on what's really happening. I know a bunch of Christian organizations who, fight this, but I barely hear of, like, any type of government thing or, thing that's happening. And I love that you said there are companies that exist like what yours was in the film. So,
Yes, of course. Well, so in real life, I said I'm a police officer and I work with ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children
that, yeah.
departments. That's most every police department has that, and they have
Okay.
their ICAC areas, and some are stronger than others. And they've got officers that are out there and in touch. We know who a lot of these predators are. There's just a way to have to take them down, and there's ways to get the word out there. And one of them might be, to make a television show about it. We've discussed it. We're in the process of it, and because I'm an officer that could, that could change things. I mean, it's a real, oops. It's a real deal. I mean, I'm a real deal. So
That's awesome. I don't think I knew that either.
yeah, no, I'm a sworn sheriff deputy in Frederick County, Virginia, and a reserve police officer in Pocatello, Idaho. And the law enforcement people that I know are amazing, and they want to do the right things. And so getting the word out there as to what things are going on or what things are happening and what kind of people are out there. We may do a show taking down some of these bad guys and telling the stories, and hopefully that gets people more aware and
Yeah.
more savvy and being able to protect themselves better.
Well, I really pray that that does happen, because I
Mm.
see that's going to be really effective. So thank you for even having the heart for that. Who are these traffickers? There was something in the film that kind of struck me when one of the traffickers took his grandmother to church,
Mhm.
and like it made him human. Like he was a monster to me the entire time until that moment. And I was like,
Whoops. Yes. And he took his grandma to church, and if she had any idea what he was doing, she would have strangled him herself. I
right.
imagine how awful that would be. But they're everybody. You don't know. You can't tell. Sometimes it's crime organizations, and there's just individuals inside, and it's really shocking to see who the people are who do this, and who the clients are, who are aware of what's going on.
Mm,
Uh, it's stunning. It could be your everyday neighbor. It's people you wouldn't expect, and it's people that you would expect. The obvious, and the crime cartels and groups that do that. Whether it's gang activity, which certainly exists, and it's this huge, wide, varied cross section of bad people who do this, and allow it to continue and perpetrate this. I can't give you any. You can't. There's no, like you said.
yeah.
The guy he's taking his grandma to church, and then he
Yeah.
calls his other buddy to try to like move some of his cargo over, and that's a whole different guy, and that's a whole
Right.
different life.
Yeah.
But this stuff exists
Yeah,
every day.
that's the scariest part of it, that you don't know. Before we
We
go,
also send them
what
internationally. They'll take them and to get them out of the
right,
states. They'll send them
right.
international. It's a worldwide business, and it's huge. It's just awful. It exists in so many countries, in so many places, and the fact that almost 1 million people go missing here in the United States a year tells you it's a giant problem. If it
Yeah.
happens like that in the United States, imagine how bad it is elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's something that really needs to be on people's mind. They can't just think that, we're American. Like, no. Yeah.
This exists. You can't sweep this one under the rug.
Was there anything that you took from the film after putting yourself in through all that, and even reading the storyline? Was there anything different that maybe reached you or touched you?
What just made it more real for me, to really have these conversations with my son or my god kids, and just really try to hit it home every single time. And I showed them just the trailer for the film, and that does a little something, a little shock value to them. We're like, could that? And they ask the questions, does that really happen? Does that exist? And I'm
Right.
like, yes, it does. There are sick people out there, which is why I always want you near me. That's why I want to have my eyes on you when I'm someplace. I just want to be able to see that you're nearby. And that's why my son is a fighter. He's a trained fighter. And I wanted that for his confidence and his awareness and his his situational awareness and his ability to rely on his ability to take care of himself, defend himself.
Mm.
And it was a great thing to do. And I discuss that stuff with him all the time. And like I said, something just happened yesterday where he wasn't situationally aware as he should have been, as situationally as aware as he should have been. And we had the conversation, and he, that brought him up to the next level, so that you can live life happy and running around, but you just have to be aware, because there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
bad stuff out there all the time. It's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in. It's not like this is unprecedented either. This is the world we've always lived in. And you know, I pray for the best and I prepare for the worst.